Today we're going to be focusing on the executive branch. Throughout this video, we're going to be looking at two major questions. What are the roles of the president, and what are the formal and informal qualifications for the presidency? The president makes hundreds and hundreds of decisions that affect the nation, and in making these decisions, they must try to consider what is in the best interest of the country. While we're looking at the presidency, I think it's best to look at this quote by Lyndon B. Johnson, who was president during the 60s. A president's hardest task is not to do what is right, but to know what is right. The executive branch is a really large branch, so we want to know who's included. First, we have the president, the vice president, the executive office of the president, the cabinet and executive departments, and independent agencies. In this video, we're going to be looking at the president solely. At any given time, of course, only one person is the President of the United States. The office with all of its awesome powers and duties belongs to that one individual. Whoever that person may be, he, and most likely someday she, must fill several different roles, and all of them at the same time. The President is simultaneously the Chief of State, the Chief Executive, the Chief Administrator, the Chief Diplomat, Commander-in-Chief, Chief Legislator, Chief of Party, and Chief Citizen. To begin with, the President is Chief of State. This is the ceremonial head of the government of the United States. He or she is then the symbol of all of the people of the nation. In many countries, the Chief of State reigns but does not rule. This is certainly true of the Queen of England, Denmark, and the Netherlands, and the kings of Norway, Sweden, and Belgium. Also the Emperor of Japan and the presidents of Italy and Germany. It is just as certainly not true of the President of the U.S. The President both reigns and rules. The President is the nation's chief executive, vested by the Constitution with the executive power of the United States. The power is immensely broad in both domestic and foreign affairs. Indeed, the American presidency is often described as the most powerful office in the world. Please don't forget, the president is not all-powerful. He or she lives in an environment filled with constitutional checks and balances. The president is also the chief administrator, the director of the huge executive branch of the federal government. He or she heads one of the largest governmental machines the world has ever known. Today, the president directs an administration that employs some 2.8 million civilians and spends some $3.8 trillion a year. Every president is also the nation's chief diplomat, the main architect of American foreign policy, and the nation's chief spokesman to the rest of the world. "I make foreign policy," President Truman once said, and he did. Everything the president says and does is closely followed both here and abroad. In close concert with the president's role in foreign affairs, the Constitution also makes him or her the commander-in-chief of the nation's armed forces. The 1.4 million men and women in uniform and all of the nation's military might are subject to the president's direct and immediate control. The Constitution does give Congress some significant powers in foreign affairs and over the military, but the president has long since become dominant in both fields. The president is also the nation's chief legislator, the principal author of its public policies. Most often, it is the president who sets the overall shape of the congressional agenda, initiating, suggesting, requesting, insisting, and demanding that Congress enact most of the major pieces of legislation that it does. The president and Congress do sometimes clash, and the president does not always get his or her way on Capitol Hill. Still, working with Congress occupies a major part of the president's time. The president is automatically the chief of party, the acknowledged leader of the political party that controls the executive branch, and is virtually unchallengeable in that role. As you know, parties are not mentioned in the Constitution, but they do have a vital place in the workings of the American governmental system. Much of the real power and influence of the president depends on his or her ability to play this critical role. And last but not least, the office also automatically makes its occupants the nation's chief citizen. The president is expected to be the representative of all the people. He or she is expected to take the high road and champion the public interests against the many different and competing private interests. Listing the president's several roles is a useful and convenient way to describe the president's job. But remember, the president must play all of these roles simultaneously, and they are all interconnected. None of them can be performed in isolation. The manner in which a president plays any one role can have a real effect on his or her ability to play another, and even all of them. According to the Constitution, the president must meet 3 formal qualifications for office. The president must attain the age of 35 years old. John F. Kennedy at 43 was the youngest person ever elected, but Teddy Roosevelt reached the White House by secession at age 42. Ronald Reagan, who was 69 when he was first elected, left office at the age of 77. The president must be a resident for 14 years within the U.S. Given the elections of Hoover and Eisenhower, we know that here the Constitution means any 14 years in a person's life. Hoover and General Eisenhower spent several years outside the country before winning the White House. Lastly, the president must be a natural-born citizen. Some controversies have occurred from this. For example, do the words natural-born mean native-born? That means born in the United States? The constitutional requirements for the presidency are few. However, the informal qualifications, the experience, and personal qualities that the public look for in a president are many. The backgrounds of the people who have become president share many common features. Most presidents have been well-educated white men from middle to upper-class families. In 1984, though, Geraldine Ferraro became the first woman to run for VP on a major party ticket. Several African American men and women have sought the presidency, none winning a major party's nomination until 2008. That year, Barack Obama made history when he was elected the first African American president. All presidents to this point have had a religious background in some Christian denomination. There's only been one Roman Catholic president thus far, JFK. 3/4 of the presidents have had some background in the military. George Washington established a pattern followed by such men as Andrew Jackson, Zachary Taylor, and Ulysses S. Grant. In recent years, Americans have tended to favor former governors for the White House. For example, 4 recent presidents, Jimmy Carter, Ronald Reagan, Bill Clinton, and George W. Bush, have served as governors. Now, a president does not get the position by filling out an application. Instead, a president must win the support and eventually the votes of Americans. So while the background of potential presidents are important, presidents also possess appealing personal qualities. Successful presidents are likable. They possess evident qualities of leadership. They also are able to communicate their ideas effectively. They should be persuasive at a minimum, and if possible, inspiring. In the age of TV and the internet, when public access to the president is at an all-time high, a president's appearance is also significant. A president needs to be appearing dignified, confident, and poised. They should also demonstrate a certain degree of charisma. Presidents must continue to demonstrate these qualities in the faces of constant challenges. Day in and day out, presidents must work well with friends and foes alike. They must effectively manage the vast workings of a huge executive department. They must be able to present a clear vision of what they plan to do for the nation and how they plan to do it. When a crisis strikes, they must exhibit calm and control, and they must do all of this under constant scrutiny and enormous pressure. Framers considered a number of different limits on the length of the presidential term. The framers finally settled on a 4-year term. Until 1951, the Constitution placed no limit on the number of terms a president might serve. Several presidents, beginning with Washington, refused to seek no more than 2 terms. Soon, the no third term tradition became an unwritten rule. Franklin Delano Roosevelt broke the tradition by seeking and winning a third term in 1940 and then a fourth in 1944. To prevent this from reoccurring, the 22nd Amendment made the unwritten custom limiting presidential terms a part of the written Constitution. Each president may now serve a maximum of 2 full terms, 8 years in office. A president who succeeds the office after the midpoint in a term could possibly serve for more than 8 years. In that case, the president may finish out the predecessor's term and then seek 2 full terms of his or her own. However, no president may serve more than 10 years in the office. Congress determines the president's annual salary. The president's pay was first set at $25,000 a year in 1789. In 1999, it is now $400,000 per year. Congress has also provided the president with a $50,000 a year expense allowance. They also have several other extras. This includes the White House, a magnificent 132-room mansion set on an 18.3-acre estate in the heart of the nation's capital. It also includes a sizable suite of offices and a large staff to assist him, a fleet of automobiles, the lavishly fitted Air Force One, and several other planes and helicopters. Camp David, the resort hideaway in the mountains in Maryland, and the finest medical, dental, and other health care available. It also includes generous travel and entertainment funds and many other fringe benefits. At this point in time, this concludes the video on the president. I have a few things for you to answer. What is the president's most important role? What important informal qualities do you look for in a president? Do you think the 22nd Amendment was a good idea? Is the president compensated too much? And do you agree or disagree with LBG's quote, "A president's hardest task is not to do what is right, but to know what is right"? I look forward to hear from you.